It is April 1917, and you are standing on a damp, shivering airfield in northern France. The morning mist clings to your wool tunic, heavy and cold, seeping through the fabric until your skin feels like parchment. The air is thick with the cloying, sweet scent of castor oil, a greasy byproduct of the rotary engine powering your BE-2C biplane. You adjust your leather flight goggles, pulling the strap until the rubber bites into your skin, leaving a stinging indentation. This is your ritual, a grounding act before you leave the earth and ascend into the sky. You believe in the romance of flight, the nightly duels, and the glory promised by the headlines in the London newspapers. You do not know that the average life expectancy for a pilot in your squadron is less than 18 hours of flight time. You are just a young man preparing for patrol, unaware that your machine is already derisively called Fokker fodder by the men who have seen too much. As you step toward the cockpit, the engine sputters, coughing out a plume of blue smoke, ready to pull you into a sky far less empty than you imagine. This realization that your machine is a death trap is the first crack in the facade of your youthful idealism, a shift that begins to color every decision you make from this moment forward. The engine noise fades into a rhythmic thrum that follows you back to the barracks, where you wait for the weather to break. The hut smells of damp wool and stale tobacco, a scent that will forever trigger a phantom anxiety in your chest. You play cards with men whose faces you try not to memorize, knowing that familiarity is a luxury you cannot afford. You watch their hands shake when they reach for a cigarette and ignore the empty cots lining the wall beds stripped bare. The blankets folded with a precision that feels like a final mocking insult to the living. You write letters home, telling your mother about beautiful sunsets and camaraderie, omitting the fact that your plane vibrates so violently, your teeth ache, and your vision blurs. You do not mention that the cold at 10,000 feet turns your fingers into frozen, useless claws, or that you must beat your hands against the fuselage to feel the blood return, risking a stall in the process. The official briefings talk of dominating the skies, but the reality is a slow, grinding attrition that wears down your resolve. You watch new boys arrive, fresh-faced and eager, only to disappear into the clouds. You convince yourself that you are different, that you have a knack for this, and that your reflexes are sharper than the rest. You cling to the myth of the ace because the alternative, that you are merely fodder, is too heavy to carry. You fold your letter, seal the envelope, and listen to the wind rattling the roof, wondering if the sky will be clear enough tomorrow to test your luck. This internal dissonance, the gap between the hero you pretend to be and the terrified boy you actually are, is the true burden of the war. The shift happens on a Tuesday. You are flying in formation, the sky a deceptive, brilliant blue that hides the predators lurking in the sun's glare. You're watching your wingman's tail when you see a flash of red. An albatross dives out of the sun, a streak of crimson. It is not a duel, it is an execution. You watch your wingman's plane, a fragile lattice of wood and fabric, disintegrate in a bloom of orange flame. There is no time for chivalry, no time for the maneuvers you practiced in training. The fuel tank, positioned behind the engine, has caught a stray tracer round, turning the cockpit into a furnace. You realize your plane is not a chariot but a coffin waiting for a spark. You dive, your goggles fogging with the hot moisture of your breath, obscuring your vision. You pull the stick back, praying the wings hold against the G-force, feeling the airframe groan in protest. You return to base, your hands shaking so violently you cannot unbuckle your harness. The ground crew looks at the empty space in the formation and says nothing. They know you know. The official report will call it a gallant engagement, but you know it was a slaughter. You climb out, legs feeling like lead, realizing the sky is no longer a place of glory. It is a vast, empty graveyard, and you are merely a ghost haunting the perimeter. April 1917 turns into a gray, mechanical blur of engine failure and terror. You are flying the SE-5A now, a sturdier machine, but the attrition remains hungry. You learn that this war is not won by individual skill, but by the crushing volume of bodies thrown into the furnace. You stop learning the names of the men who arrive at the barracks. It is a necessary survival mechanism, a way to insulate your heart from the inevitable. You focus on your goggles, the only thing separating your eyes from the freezing slipstream and the stinging spray of castor oil. They are scratched now, etched with the grit of the airfield, and stained with the residue of a life lived in the air. You realize the romantic narrative of the ace is a lie. You are not a knight. You are a temporary occupant of a flammable frame, a worker in a factory of death. This realization changes how you view the war. It is no longer a grand adventure, but a logistical nightmare where your life is a line item in a ledger. The final patrol of the month begins under a bruised, plum-colored sky. At 10,000 feet, the clouds break, revealing a swarm of metal and wood. It is a chaotic, grinding collision of machines and men. You see the boy who sat across from you at breakfast bank, his plane to the left, his movements frantic and uncoordinated. A burst of tracer fire catches his tail, and his machine begins a slow, agonizing spin toward the mud. You do not dive to help. You are locked in a dance with a shadow that has tracked you since dawn. Your own engine sputters, choking you with the metallic tang of burning oil. You fight for every inch of altitude, heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You land with a jagged bullet hole in your wing, inches from your leg, the metal torn and twisted. The ground crew swarms the plane, but you stay in the cockpit, staring at the oil-stained fabric, unable to move. You have survived, but you have lost the ability to believe in the mission. You are a ghost inhabiting a shell, knowing now that the sky is just another place to die, and that your survival is nothing more than a statistical anomaly. You climb out, struck by the crushing weight of your own survival. You walk past the mechanics patching your wing, their faces impassive as they hammer metal back into shape. You move toward the barracks, stopping near the flight line to watch the next wave of pilots. They are young, their goggles polished like new coins, reflecting the sun with a brilliance that hurts to look at. Their eyes are bright with the same hollow ignorance you possessed months ago. You want to grab them, to tell them the sky is not a stage for heroes, but an indifferent graveyard that cares nothing for their courage. But you do not speak. You stand in the shadow of a hangar and watch them climb into their coffins. You pull out your own goggles, rubbing the leather strap, worn thin from sweat and salt. You are a ghost in your own life, moving through the motions of a soldier while your spirit remains over the burning fields. The official reports will call you a hero, but you are a man who has seen too much of the truth to ever be whole again. You turn your back on the runway knowing the war will end, but the silence you carry will stay with you forever. This silence is the weight of the men who did not come back, a burden you will carry into the peace that follows. Decades have passed. You are an old man now, sitting in a room where the light hits the dust motes like the haze over the trenches. You pull open a desk drawer. Inside, resting on yellowed paper, are the leather goggles. They are brittle. The rubber cracked into a spider web of lines, the glass clouded with age. You lift them, and the smell of castor oil and burnt fuel rises, pulling you back into the cockpit. You are back in the vibration of the engine, the wind tearing at your ears, the terrifying isolation of the clouds. You understand now that the war was never about knights or romantic tales. It was about ordinary people asked to endure the impossible until they were hollowed out. You were not a hero. You were a young man who learned that truth is the first casualty of conflict. You realized the goggles did not help you see the enemy. They only helped you hide from the reality of what you were doing. You place the goggles back in the drawer and push it shut with a final click. The circle is complete. You are at peace, not because the war made sense, but because you survived it, and you never stopped telling yourself the truth about the cost of the sky. You have finally reconciled the boy who wanted glory with the man who knows the price of it, and in that reconciliation, you find the only victory that matters.